Don't worry, even though you may not be the smartest, you still deserve to be loved by me, so that's not going anywhere. But I want to talk about this, catch-22 problem that a lot of game devs has, and that, people trying to get into the industry, trying to make games, often get encountered with this problem of, okay, I want to make games, but you know nothing about making games. So you start, you watch your tutorials and things like that, but very quickly you realize like, oh shit, making games is kind of hard. It's like the culmination of all of the difficulties of regular software development, and then you're also doing product development, you're doing art on top of that, and then marketing. It's not the easiest thing to do. And I think there is a problem where a lot of people do have some elitism, where either you know absolutely nothing about game dev whatsoever and you should just stop making games and go back to something else, or the opposite is, okay, well, you're Eric Barone and you are literally the god of good game development and there is nothing possibly wrong that you can do. And there's no middle space, basically. So I just want to go over that gap, basically, and talk about, hey, what can you do when you realize that, hey, actually, I'm not top of my game yet. I don't know everything yet about game. Because that's true for me, that's true for you, that's true for everyone who is watching this video. There is no way, even though you may really love yourself a lot and have some narcissistic tendencies, if you're really honest with yourself, nobody watching this knows fully what they're doing. Sure, we have ideas, but even if you've had previous massive game dev successes, you can't always guarantee that all of your future games will be the same, because game dev isn't just one easy formula where, hey, if I do X, I will get Y result, and it's very known. And I think the first problem that a lot of game devs have is, the concept of known unknowns versus unknown unknowns. So what this means is, okay, you want to make your game, but it's the first game and you already know art is going to be an issue. You don't really know anything about 3D modeling, you don't know anything about post-processing, shading, whatever. You know that, hey, right now, I'm not fully certain how this works, but you know that it's a problem, which means that you can work on it. And it means that you can, okay, look up tutorials. How do I do my shading? How do I learn post-processing in whatever engine you're using? How do I learn programming specific mechanics and all of that? Those are often the easy ones, the known unknowns. But the bigger problem for game devs that most game devs struggle with as well is the unknown unknowns, basically, which means what is everything that you do not know right now? And this can go very deep. It can go from very broad topics like, hey, it turns out you actually have no clue how game design works, for example, and the things you make just don't end up being fun. That's something that may be the case for you, but it could also be something much more specific, like, hey, you know how to model, but there is this specific pipeline issue where there's bad optimization for your specific use case in your specific engine. That's also a risk that you don't know it's going to come, but it's also very specific. And this is probably one of the biggest dangers of game dev. Well, you don't know what you're not good at. And there are definitely some things that you can do here to kind of prevent that. And probably the easiest tip I can give you here is to make games that you actually play. I am very much not an RTS and 4X kind of player, but if I go into game dev and I'm looking purely from a min-max perspective and I see, oh, the highest earning genre is super in-depth and complex 4X games, so that's going to be what I make as well. I don't know what I'll be struggling with, maybe with item balancing or with certain AI systems, but I know that there will be a shit ton of things that are unknown unknowns for me, and I am going to hit a wall at some point. Whereas I play a lot of shooter games, and whilst that's not something that we exactly want to do, if I were to suddenly break off from Byte and have to go solo, probably I would try and make my own boomer shooter, because that is a genre that I have played a lot already as well. I don't really encounter a lot of game developers who have never played a game in their life. Honestly, it's kind of boring almost when I talk to any of you guys, and every single person is like, yeah, I want to be a game dev because I've been playing games my whole life. That is good, but use that as well. If you have always played a specific genre, don't feel like, oh, I want to make the highest earning one, so I'm going to make an open world survival game when all you've played is racing games, for example. So look at those things. Like I said, for example, I would go for the boomer shooter because I know what boomer shooters generally require. What are the mechanics that I would need to have? What type of AI? How would I do the visuals? Whereas if you tell me, gun to my head, make a 4X game like Stellaris, yeah, that's not going to happen. Not alone just from the scope, but also just looking at how many unknowns that there are coming ahead of me. You kind of just have to treat game dev as those maps in Grand Theft Auto where when you just get started, everything is blacked out except the very center of where you're right now. And that is game dev, that entire map that is all black, because you don't know what parts of game dev aren't there yet. You have to go into a certain direction, into a certain field of game development, whether that is coding, whether it is art, whether it is marketing or whatever, and try and uncover as much as you can just to learn about, hey, these could be future risks for me. These are things that I need to keep in mind when I'm making my future game. So you need to step out and you need to be aware that, hey, if I do get started, I will fuck up at certain things. And that's why you often hear these things of like, hey, take the scope of your first game, slash it in half, and then double it in like time estimation so you have a more realistic idea, because you are going to a point on that map that you have not discovered yet, and you are not certain what dangers lie ahead in the development process. But that doesn't mean that the title of this video doesn't apply to me. I'm definitely also kind of stupid still when it comes to game dev on a lot of fields. You'll see that. That's what we talk about on this channel. Honestly, if I didn't make dumb mistakes, I wouldn't have anything to talk about in these videos to teach you. That's the case with pretty much everyone on YouTube. Even super successful devs, they don't know everything. And even if they do know everything, there's still a lot of factors that maybe don't apply to you. And once again, that's okay. You are never going to find someone who is a 100% greatness in all factors, who can teach you everything, and you also have the skill to implement on that. That's okay, once again. But you know what I do have? Well, maybe I'm not a masterful game designer or whatever, or a great marketeer or anything like that. I'm still better than I was half a year ago. I'm still better than I was a month ago or whatever. I learn things constantly, and that is just expanding the map and getting more wisdom of, hey, how does game dev work? And I think anyone who tells you that, hey, you should stop being a game developer because you're like too bad right now, well, they're just grabbing you and they're pulling you back down into the bucket, because you need to go out there, you need to fuck up sometimes, and that is the only way you're going to learn. And ideally, yeah, if you can share what you've learned, that's better as well. But don't feel like, oh, I haven't shipped anything, I haven't had a massive success, and like I should just stop being a game dev. That is also not the approach. There is nobody really, either on YouTube or outside of YouTube, who is like, oh my god, I have peaked and there is absolutely nothing I can do anymore to get better at game dev, so to say. So just keep going at it and keep looking back. Have some dedicated moments to play some old games or whatever and be like, damn, I made this. This was dog shit. How could I have ever been proud of that? That is fine if it's like something you did like 2-3 years ago. It's like you move on and it makes you feel better now. So remember to touch base sometimes and just look at where you come from, because often it can be very dangerous and draining to always feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, I just need to push harder and all of that. And one thing I should clarify here is that making a game is actually just a small part of game dev as a whole, because there are a lot of things, and I see this as well with people who are like learning game dev for the first time, where they feel like, oh, I'm gonna start on my dream game, my Zelda-like open world thing. And okay, they start working on it, they spend a few months on it, and one day they find like some magical thing, they just discover like a new programming thing, or they finally get good at like, making their own art or whatever. And they're like, okay, all of the work I've done now, I kind of just want to redo all of it and keep working on that same game. But this is a trap, in my opinion, because you do often hear of those games that are like, oh, I spent 7 years working on this one game and I ended up rewriting the entire game like 4 or 5 times. This is something that Stardew Valley, for example, also did. I don't think you should be a Stardew Valley though. I personally very much disagree with that idea of, hey, every time that you discover like an improvement of your workflow or whatever, or you learn something cool new about, hey, the actual game code to certain mechanics, don't go and throw away everything you did before and just get started from zero because it's like, oh, I want to redo it all. That is not the approach, I think, because shipping a game is still so goddamn important, because there's so many things that you can't learn from YouTube tutorials. You can't really learn pressing the release button on Steam. Yeah, you can watch devlogs of like how much money my game made on Steam, but there's something different. It's like hard to explain, of you actually getting invested into your marketing, into your tagging, into having your good Steam page, into having your trailer, into playtesting your game, into so many things that, you know, you can watch videos on playtesting, but that's not going to give you playtesters. You can very much live in this dream world fantasy of, hey, my game is gonna be like, I'm just gonna work on my game and it's going to be a massive success the moment it releases. That often isn't the case. And then maybe you might have a good game after 10 years of development, but nothing else is there to back it up. And once again, it just doesn't lead to going anywhere. And so that's why I would rather suggest you to just make games. Don't make your dream game, make smaller games, and just focus on going through the entire game dev cycle already. Not just making the game, but actually releasing it somewhere. And if your first games are trash, yeah, of course, maybe not put them on Steam, but things like itch.io, still kind of similar. You have to do more things there than just having the project only sit on your computer's local hard drive. That way, this is another good thing actually, you can build up your own little small portfolio of, hey, I've been able to actually ship games, I've been able to learn all of these things. This is something that's great if you want to try collaborating later on. Because nobody wants to collaborate with someone who just says, oh, I have this game idea or I want to make this game. And like, yeah, sure, I'm a coder, I can program your game. But you've never released anything. You've nothing to show for it except for like one big unfinished project that is probably a giant mess of code because you've refactored it 7 times as well. You can always take the things you learn into new games as well, but don't keep spending years working on the same project. I think you should try and go through the entire game dev process the sooner you can, just to learn a bit more along the way. Don't start with your dream open world Zelda game, like I said, but instead, you know, go through the steps. First, like lowest basic step is you just do a start to finish tutorial of, hey, making like Code Monkey's Kitchen Chaos series, for example, where you make your own little like Overcooked style game. Sure, you will not be breaking the boundaries of game design and all of the awesome mechanics in here, but you're going to get your foot in the door and you're going to go through the entire process of making the game, not shipping the game, making the game already. And that's a good one. Then the step next, once you've gotten a bit more of a technical knowledge of, hey, how does my engine work and things like that, is joining things like game jams, where you on purpose have a very small scope. And there you have a few days to make the game, and then it's not really like full on marketing the game, but you gotta make an itch page and you wanna make it look pretty and things like that. From there on, you can go into a small scoped game where we're talking about maybe a few weeks and you just wanna throw that on itch. And once you've gone through those layers, basically, that's when you can start considering, okay, let's do those first Steam releases. I've gotten a bit more experience now. I've uncovered more of my map. Let me now go for it. And I think that is a much more healthy and productive approach than focusing on just making one big game and immediately setting out with a scope that honestly you have too many unknowns of what am I gonna go wrong, what should I learn along the way, and all of that. So start small, stay humble, and accept that, hey, even though I may not be perfect right now as a game developer, I'm still doing my goddamn best, and I think I can make it work. If you want to follow our journey on that, then be sure to head down below and subscribe, because we upload these videos 2 times a week talking about things we learn, the mistakes that we make, and also the wins we have along the way. But we just want to be open with it so you can learn from our mistakes and combine that with, hey, maybe you're not making the most painful mistakes that we've made, but you can make your own other mistakes and learn from that. You don't always have to make a completely failed game launch to learn something. It can be smaller things as well. So just get after your engine, try to not go for those giant ass projects. I'm still not a fan of that. And just accept that, hey, I'm not gonna be perfect immediately, but that's okay. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!